everyone, and welcome to the newest episode of the Read Right to Left podcast. I am G from Simply G, joined by my always wonderful co-host, Ray from Whimsical Pictures.
Hi, everyone.
And this month is March, the third month of the year, and also, coincidentally, or not, in fact, my birthday. And so I got to choose the topic, which means that, unsurprisingly, we are going to be having another creator spotlight with my absolute favorite mangaka, Fumi Yoshinaga. Yay! Yay! Woo! The crowd goes wild. Woo! a mangaka who I mention pretty much every episode anyway, and will continue to do so. Because I do have an agenda.
As you should.
I do have an agenda, and it is to encourage people to read her stuff. And by encourage, I mean force people to read her stuff. And so we are going to be talking about many of her titles, I'm sure. Definitely her most popular ones, her most notable ones, her longest ones. But probably some of the other bits and bobs that we've gotten, because surprisingly, well, I don't know if surprising is quite the right word. No, surprisingly, we do have pretty much everything she's ever published available in English. There's one short story collection that we don't have, as of the last time I checked, but everything else we've gotten in English, and it's a little bit surprising insofar as I can't believe all of her stuff got licensed, because I wouldn't say she's the most well-known creator around, and not the most well-known, popular creator around, especially when a lot of her stuff was being licensed by DMP.
Yeah.
But thankfully, most of her stuff, even the out-of-print stuff, is pretty easy to find. There's a couple odd volumes here and there that are impossible to find, but majority of everything else, which is a whole bunch of stuff in very wide genres, a lot of different types of books, are all available, and for relatively decent prices as well. So, we are going to be talking about this wonderful creator, her wonderful stories, and of course answering all your wonderful people's questions, as always. Thank you so much for sending them in. We got a great bunch of them, and hopefully we'll be able to answer those questions, gush incessantly about Ms. Yoshinaga. And if you haven't read any of her stuff, hopefully by the end of it you will be at least somewhat interested in checking her titles out, because they are very very good. If you couldn't tell, I am very biased though, so this is not one for people who don't want to hear me just gush love about all of her books.
But that's why we're here, G.
I mean, this is true. This is very true. We've never claimed to not have an agenda. But now we're just being incredibly blatant about it. More so than usual. Because we're always very blatant about it.
Yeah, I'm always very clear with my biases. But
yeah.
Do we want to start out with, like, our history with Fumi Yoshinaga? I guess how we found her, etc.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure you've read everything, but I can talk about which titles that I've read.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, do you want to start as our resident Fumi Yoshinaga expert?
Yes. Okay. So I was introduced to Fumi Yoshinaga actually through an article written by, I don't know if they still run this column, but it was published on Manga Bookshelf, which every so often they would do an article either spotlighting a series or... No, I think it was a series. And the title that they had chosen... I was reading all of their articles because of that nature, because I was... this was still fairly early in my manga career. I'd only been reading manga maybe 1-2 years at this point, but I'd already kind of gotten the feeling that there was stuff that out there that people weren't talking about that I'd probably enjoy more than the stuff that was really new or that was super duper popular. So I liked Manga Bookshelf a lot because they had a really great variety of creators and writers on that, and so I always kind of felt that their discussion was very interesting.
They also always skewed older, which I
Yes.
appreciated.
Yes. And so they had an article about Fumi Yoshinaga's 4-volume series, Flower of Life, which even at the time was quite unknown. It was a little bit of an older publication. Even then, the 4th volume was basically impossible to find. But the way that it was talked about, the way that the story was discussed, it really intrigued me. It really made me want to try the series. And in that, it wasn't just about Flower of Life. It definitely had some discussion about some of her other titles, most notably Antique Bakery, which of course is, if you're an anime watcher, that you may be familiar with that because that's the only one of her series that have gotten an anime. So that was it was a mix between reading that, learning about her that way, and then being so intrigued from their discussion that I wanted to try reading her stuff for myself. So, which tended to be the case typically for these articles anyway. So I decided that I would get Flower of Life if I could, at least the first 3 volumes, which if you are looking for them, they are still fairly easy to find everywhere. It's the last volume, the 4th volume, that is just, I printed in way smaller numbers, and it will be a miracle if you find them at a decent price.
DMP.
Exactly.
God damn it.
And somehow, incredibly, I was actually able to find that 4th volume pretty much immediately for a relatively decent price. It was, more than retail, but it was far less than what it typically goes for, or just, it's, that book is almost never around anyway, so I kind of hit the jackpot in that regard. And I read it, and I fell in love with it pretty much immediately. At the same time, I watched it. It might have been a little bit before this, but at a relatively similar time frame, I watched that anime adaptation of Antique Bakery, and fell in love with that, and so decided to get the volumes for that. Read it, loved it. Then I was sold. I just was like, well, this is really good. I really want to try more of her stuff. And as mentioned, a lot of her books, a lot of the DMP books, a lot of the Tokyo Pop Blue label, the BL label that Tokyo Pop used to have, are very easy to find, very, very cheap, very much still available from Right Stuff, etc., etc. So I decided to pick up those volumes as well, because obviously I'm a BL fan. I wanted to see if I enjoyed her BL, which wouldn't, if you've read her stuff, she very often features queer characters, gay men specifically, in her stuff. So, like, it was a pretty seamless transition. And I loved her BL, and then I started Ooku and just fell in love with that. I started What Did You Eat yesterday and fell in love with that. And it's just been, honestly, like, love at first sight with me and her. And there's so many incredible parts of her stories, in how she tells stories, in how she crafts characters and situations. And there's and we'll get into it, like, when we're actually talking about these series and specifics, but there's always been a very grounded human aspect and relatability to Yoshinaga's works. Even if the character themselves isn't you, like, they make decisions that you wouldn't, or that they're in a completely different stage of their life, or they're just not someone you see yourself as. They are people that you recognize, and they interact and behave and make decisions the way that people do. And there's Flower of Life and it was described this way in this article as well, so I can't take any credit for, like, original thought here, but the way that Yoshinaga was able to capture this kind of bittersweet nostalgia of high school, insofar, I'll get into it when I talk about it more specifically, but it's kind of incredible that somebody who presumably had been out of high school and had not been a teenager for many years when she wrote that book or that series was able to capture teenage feelings so perfectly that it just, I'm going to talk about it for 3 hours, so I'm not going to get too much into it here, but it was just kind of a perfect storm of everything that I love. Obviously, character-focused stories, introspective stuff, historical fiction, domestic relationships. It's just everything that I love. So yes, I was predisposed to fall in love with Fumi Yoshinaga and her work.
Yeah, it's a really beautiful thing, I think, when you find that creator who just clicks with everything that you are. It's definitely, I think, one of the greatest joys of reading. And I think especially reading, this medium that's sort of, by its very nature, being translated into English, that comes from halfway around the world. And just realizing that someone from so far away, like, understands your heart so much is kind of a cool thing. For me, it was definitely also Manga Bookshelf that, like, turned me on to her work. Because, as we've previously established, me and G are 75% of the same person, so... yeah. But I don't remember where I started. Like, I feel like I just kind of grabbed everything I could find at the library that was hers. And I kind of read all of them around the same time. So I read... What did I read? I read All My Darling Daughters. That was an early one I read. I remember there was an article on Manga Bookshelf that was about it that intrigued me. That might have been the first one. I also read the first 2 volumes of Ooku, and to this day, I've read 3. So that's one of the biggest holes in my manga reading experience. So I will be leaving that part of the discussion entirely up to my co-host. I read the first 3 of Antique Bakery. And I think the first one of Flower of Life, and that was kind of where I started. It's just like, reading manga from the library, which means it's just like random volumes, whatever they have, right? Mm-hmm. Especially those like DMP or blue titles is like, you know, once a volume is like difficult to get, it's not like your library is going to go out of its way to find it, right?
Yeah.
So, unfortunately. And yeah, since I definitely remember, I think, being really impressed by All My Darling Daughters. I think it was one of the first 5 stars I put on Goodreads when I started that website years ago. Yeah, that's like my strongest impression of like my early interactions with Fumi Yoshinaga, I think. And I don't know, since then I've been sort of slowly collecting her titles, which are all in my American collection. I have been collecting What Did You Eat Yesterday? Since it started coming out from Vertical. That's still my favorite series by her. I'm a little behind because I hadn't really been keeping up with it since coming to Japan. I have read the first 3 volumes of Flower of Life because I did not get as lucky as G did. I've read Not Love But Delicious Foods Make Me So Happy, which is still my favorite manga title of all time. I've read all of Antique Bakery. I've read... I think the BL ones that I've read are Girard and Jacques and Truly Kindly. And then I also read, what is it? Something about a rose garden.
Garden Dreams.
That one. I've read that one too. Am I missing anything? I don't think so. I'm trying to think back into the deep recesses of my mind. I think that's everything I've read from her. Yeah.
A good chunk. A good chunk of her work.
Yep. You know what? I'm not inexperienced. I'm just not as experienced as some folks.
She's just not a crazy person like me, is what she's trying to say. But that's
my crazy goes in other directions, so it's okay.
And we know this. So and we love you all the same. So
yeah. I feel like you covered pretty much all of the things that I guess drew me to her. It really is just like, yeah, just the realism of the way that she like paints these portraits of these people, and it's not overly dramatic, it's not overly comedic, it's just kind of people as they are. They definitely feel like people who could be living next door to me or down the street.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, it's a hard thing to accomplish, and I'm not sure if I've ever read any manga creator who accomplishes it quite to the degree that Yoshinaga does. You definitely, like, although Antique Bakery is her only series to get an anime, like, that feels right to me, you know?
Yeah.
Like, that's the only one that has, like, elements that are, like, outlandish enough to, like, really work as an anime, I feel like. In some kind of way, because quite a few of her series have been adapted as dramas. Most notably Ooku and What Did You Eat Yesterday are the ones that I know about. Are both very highly regarded dramas. So yeah, that feels right to me. Like, I feel like a lot of like manga and anime fans, you know, because it's understandable because we don't get a lot of dramas translated into English and put up on like streaming services that are easily accessible. But there is a tendency to focus on like oh, this series is only, like, popular and happening if it's got an anime, which is absolutely not the case, particularly for josei series, which most of Fumi Yoshinaga's works are. Yeah. They tend to get dramas.
In saying that, everyone should also watch the anime for Antique Bakery, because it's very good. It's very funny. The thing I really love, and I mentioned it before, aside from the human element and having her characters act like real people, relatable people that you recognize, there's also, she's very funny, but also she's able, for me at least, like, she'll have you laughing at one moment, and then in three panels, the mood will completely shift, and it'll be a completely organic movement from, or feeling from, this happy, or like this comedic moment to overwhelming sadness, or just sitting in that moment where you need the support of somebody. And it's just the way that she depicts families and friendships is so powerful. I love it so much. And I mean, romantic relationships as well, but just, yeah,
I agree. I specifically like, and this, like, honestly, to me, just contributes to the realism I was talking about. But it's that she often, like, the scenes that are heart-wrenching and the scenes that are comedic are not even necessarily different scenes. Like, she'll have characters finding the humor in a terrible situation, or, you know, cracking up at a joke and then being like, oh, fuck.
Yeah. Or being, like, hysterical, just like, oh, you have to laugh or else you just cry, because it's just like, what, you're losing your mind. Everything's going wrong.
Which, like, all of that is so true to life. Like, those feelings aren't necessarily always separate from each other. They're a tangled, awful mess more often than not. And a lot of, you know, a lot of what makes life bearable is being able to find the comedy in those small moments. And I feel like the way that Yoshinaga's characters almost cope through humor is, it rings true to me, I guess, and my life.
Yes. So, I think we should talk about some of the actual titles. I mean, we've mentioned a lot of names so far of particular works, but as I mentioned, we have a lot of her stuff. We have so much of her stuff, including her long-running series, Ooku, The Inner Chambers, which has recently ended in Japan at 19 volumes, currently at 17 volumes in English. And we also, and as well as her other long-running, still ongoing series, What Did You Eat Yesterday, which is very different genre, setting, everything else. But also phenomenal. That's been put out by Vertical, as Ray mentioned. But DMP put out a lot of her shorter works, a lot of her shorter, quote-unquote, general or shoujo josei works, comparatively to Tokyo Pop, who put out a lot of her BL stuff. So,
yeah, I was wondering if maybe we want to start by quickly touching on, like, her BL, which is her earliest work.
Yeah. And I think
I feel like there's not that much to talk about, so...
Well, I wanted to mention it because her, obviously, like a lot of shoujo and josei and female mangaka, she started in BL. Well, she actually started with doujin, but she started with BL. Her first published work was The Moon and the Sandals, which is a 2-volume book available in English as it is, and considering it's a first title, like first published title, and considering the BL of the era, it is so incredibly good. It's kind of a little bit of a bait and switch. The first chapter kind of implies, well, it sets it up as this high school kid who has feelings for his teacher, his history teacher, and who's wanting to confess to him, and all of this. So if you know me, you know that I'm not a fan of student-teacher relationships, but luckily that's not what the story is. We have actually two couples, one of being the teacher and his longtime boyfriend, who is a chef, and then a high school couple who's obviously this kid and another one of his class, well, his senpai, one of his upperclassmen. Like, the BL, the thing that really strikes me about her BL is how, even then, it feels like she was very indulgent, in a similar way to, like, Natsume Ono. She was very indulgent with her own interests. So her BL has a lot of food. It has very often a historical setting. It has a lot of stuff that she's interested in. Plus, of course, like, gay men as main characters, which you see in her other stuff as well. So it was very pertinent to what she was interested in, and because of that, a lot of her stuff, especially Gerard and Jacques, doesn't, like, you don't actually necessarily read it for the romance. There's a lot of plot going on in Gerard and Jacques. There's, like, actually a lot of stuff going on, considering it's set during the French Revolution, and obviously all of that stuff happening around it. And it's not, Gerard and Jacques is not a relationship that you want to work out, because they're not a good couple. But that's the point. Like, you're not supposed to want them to work out. There's a lot of drama going on, and a lot of trauma, and a lot of everything else, and that's the point. It wasn't written to be like a sexy story about a French nobleman and this boy that he takes in. It's about, oh, here's the guy who's still, like, traumatized and grieving over the loss of his wife, and the class separation, meanwhile French Revolution, meanwhile the French courts, and everyone's just, you know, nobody even bats an eye at the promiscuity of the upper class and all this other. It's really interesting, and it's very unique in that sense. So it stands out, and a lot of her BL is a little bit like that. You don't necessarily want or think that the couple should get, I mean, there are some of her couples that you're like, oh, they're fine, but the stuff that most stands out to me is all of the other stuff in her BL that isn't about the development of the romance. Going back to The Moon and the Sandals, right? So it has this teen boy who's initially in love with his teacher, and he confesses to him, and the teacher's like, yikes, no. But also he's having, like,
I think... Sorry. I think Yoshinaga... It's interesting that, like, you know, especially right now, since it's a trend in, like, shoujo, you know, you definitely can tell which creators have, like, a teacher-student fetish. But it's interesting because Yoshinaga seems fascinated by teacher-student relationships and those feelings, but, like, also almost entirely uninterested in teachers and students actually getting together in a healthy way.
Exactly. And that's, as well, we'll get to that element as in Flower of Life as well, because it's in there too. And Solfege is also a student-teacher relationship, and that's my least favorite of her works, but it's still very good. And that's the Moon and Sandals. The reason I bring it up again is because you have this teenage boy who has feelings for his teacher. The teacher initially is like very confused, but also is having some issues with his own love life, but it very quickly, like, it doesn't develop into anything, and it very quickly, like, dismisses that right away. But because of that confession, and because it spurs this teacher to finally, like, get his shit together in relation to the man who he has loved his whole life and who he's been with his whole life, and he becomes now the mentor to these teenage kids, whilst also, like, trying to get his relationship together, because they've been together like 10 years and never had sex. I'm like, I'm not buying that for 1 second, but sure, let's believe that that's what's happened. But my favorite character of this whole series is not any single one of those boys. It is the younger sister of one of the characters, who has and she's introduced. She's the classmate of this boy who had the crush on the teacher. She's the younger sister of the older boy that he eventually gets together with. But she's introduced as his very close friend. They're best friends, and she's had feelings for him for a very long time, but very quickly she recognizes that her feelings for him will never be reciprocated. He loves her as a friend, but they're never going to be, the same feelings that she has for him. And the way that is handled, in the way that her story comes so to the forefront, it's not kind of like left as a side quest, quote unquote, or like dismissed or just introduced and wrapped up and forgotten about. It's very, very important to the overall character growth, and she's also just the best. And I don't think that that's a unique thing to just Moon and the Sandals. I think there's a lot of her stories where, especially in the BL, where the characters that are the protagonists aren't necessarily the ones that are your favorite. And all of the side characters, all of the characters introduced have a purpose. They have a reason to be there. And I've said it before in regards to BL, I've said it before in regards to Yuri, I always do enjoy when the world isn't just completely populated by gay men and or women, or women aren't just used as tools to, like, break up this gay couple.
That's what I was about to, say. That's interesting, because I feel like, although now in BL I feel like we're getting a wider range of, more positive, female side characters in BL, whether it's, a sister or a mom or a friend or whatever. I feel like particularly in the time when The Moon and the Sandals came out, BL manga was so... It's not like the problem went away, but it's less now. It was so misogynistic.
Yeah, absolutely.
So misogynistic. All of the women would just be stupid, two-faced, backstabbing bitches, just the worst.
The worst. And she's wanting to break this beautiful gay relationship apart because she was the one who was in love with him first, and thus she must...
And two men can't be together. That's gay.
That's gay, and we don't want that. So, yeah, tell me about it. So the fact that Yoshinaga has always been able to write very nuanced male and female characters, have them be active participants in the story at all times.
Have them be friends without it being weird.
Exactly, as well. Because the thing is, as I said, this sister character, she has these feelings. She confesses these feelings. But after, but she knows that it's not going to happen, and it doesn't end their friendship. It doesn't end this relationship that she's had with this boy, her friend, that she's had for 3 or 5 years. They didn't just automatically ruin everything, and it hurts her, and it's very obviously affected her, but it's not like she's wanting to wreck the relationship that this boy that she's in love with and her brother whom she loves, she doesn't want to just break them apart, because she is a kind person who understands that life doesn't always go your way, and sometimes shit's just bad, and you can feel hurt, and you can feel sad, and you can feel, like you're not going to be okay, but ultimately you have to, there's only so much you can do, and to be accepting and positive and happy and be able to keep retaining those relationships despite that is just really, it was really wonderful to see. And again, relatively unique. Again, it kind of extends to a lot of her other BL. Gerard and Jacques we mentioned. Solfège I mentioned. Ichigenmei, First Class of Civil Law. She also likes writing couples where they're both one of them's always a weird, terrible narcissist, and the other is kind of trying to keep up, but also calling them on their shit the entire time. You're a terrible person. And I know, but it's fine. You put up with it. And that's what I'm saying. They're not necessarily couples that you're oh yeah, this is a superbly healthy relationship. But it's also really interesting to read.
Also, selfish, childish older person and, patient as hell younger person who just puts up with it.
Yes, yes. She also has another BL short story collection called Don't Say Anything More Darling. I think that's all the BL. Truly Kindly and Lovers in the Night, which Lovers in the Night is a sequel / expansion on a short story from Truly Kindly, which also, again, full of fucked up relationships. I'm pretty sure there's a story about a serial killer or some sort of something in
I don't remember
in Truly Kindly. There's that first short story is wild, man. I don't really remember.
I remember liking that collection.
It's good. It is really good. There's also the sex robot one.
Oh yeah.
That when I say her stuff is all over the place, it is insofar as genre and setting. It is all over the place. But you can always have faith that she will return to her roots, which is Rose of Versailles Dojin. I.e. historical fiction. Yeah. Also, man, do not try to even consider looking for her Dojin, because it is in nobody's price range. I would
love to have that.
Yeah. It's only gonna cost you a cool $1,000 at least for...
Great. I'll get my pocketbook.
She put out a lot of of Versailles Dojin. It's
what
again,
ship?
Oscar and what's his name?
Oscar Andre.
Yeah.
Okay, I was like, does she do some weird BL stuff? 'Cause
No.
Andre and Fairson or something.
No.
No, we're keeping it standard.
Yeah, and a lot of her dojin is kind of single character focused as well, whether that be Oscar or Andre. As well, it's not just like kissing books.
But we love kissing books.
We love kissing books, but that's not all that she made self-published. But yeah, so there's a lot of, as I said at the very beginning, if you're wanting pretty much any of her BL, you can get it. Honestly, like, either look at Right Stuff or look at, like, wherever you buy secondhand manga or whatever. All of the Tokyo Pop stuff, all of the DMP stuff, aside from that one volume, which is not a BL, but, like, all of her stuff from DMP is nickels on the dime. Like, it is so cheap. So, absolutely invest if any of the titles that we talk about sound interesting to you. The Viz stuff is still in print and relatively new, so there's more standard pricing, as is Vertical. But you can get a pretty decent chunk of, especially her early work, pretty easily.
I'll also say Ooku, What Did You Eat Yesterday, All My Darling Daughters. Those three I know are available digitally as well.
Yes, that would make sense. And I would presume Not Love But Delicious Food Makes Me So Happy is also available digitally. That's put out by Yen.
That one as well. Yeah.
So I would presume it is also available. But yes, so she started with BL, like many female mangaka do, and then eventually transitioned to more not typical, but she transitioned to shoujo and josei magazines, where she was still doing all of the shit that she loved and was playing around with in her BL, but was able to reach a broader audience than just the fujoshi, who are looking for BL primarily. So, in reflection of that, as I said, even her more general work, Antique Bakery, and What Did You Eat Yesterday, and definitely so, feature gay men as protagonists or as, like, main characters. And there's a lot of acknowledgement of homosexuality in stuff like Ooku and the other one I'm thinking of, Flower of Life. So it's always something that she's written about, featured. In Not Love But Delicious Foods Makes Me So Happy, which is, if you haven't read, it's a single volume. It's basically a restaurant review manga of various places that...
Miss Fumi Yoshinaga, a manga artist of unknown origin, who goes around to all of her favorite restaurants in the Tokyo area and recommends them to you. And at the end of every chapter is like a map and like their service hours at the time that the chapter came out. So it is literally a restaurant guide, but it's also Miss Fumi Yoshinaga hanging out with all of her friends who, any resemblance to person's real life or fictional is entirely coincidental. But anyway, one of her friends is a gay man. And when she finds out that he's gay, it's one of the funniest parts in the book, because she just, like, immediately does, like, kowtowing to him, like, I'm sorry. I pay the bills writing books about gay men, but they're not books about real gay men. They're like kissing books.
And he's like, shrug. He's like, oh well, like, that's fine. I don't care. Like, you do you, that's fine.
Get that bread.
And it's sort of funny because at the same time, I would argue that, in a sense, things like What Did You Eat Yesterday portrays gay men in a much more real way than, like, even gay commie, because that's, like, obviously pornography, like, or very much explicit focused, whereas in regards to normalizing queerness, things like What Did You Eat Yesterday are a bit more indicative of quote-unquote real gay men, as it were.
Well, also, that one is not josei. It's a mainstream seinen series.
Seinen, yeah.
I think it runs in... Does it run in afternoon?
I think so.
It's one of those times of day magazines, morning or afternoon. I think it's afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
But which is a very mainstream seinen magazine. So it, is able to get, like, a fairly wide readership that I think is important because, like, it's, it's a food manga. It's got a recipe every chapter, very detailed recipe every chapter. And, it's just about this gay couple who, like, it could be anyone. Like, they're just people,
Mm-hmm.
And they do face things that are, unique to their experience as gay men. But, like, it's just their lives,
Yeah. And at the same time, they also face things that aren't unique to being gay men. They face things that are pretty universal to the human experience.
And specifically to, like, being in a very long-term relationship with someone, and aging.
Yeah, being older, being middle-aged.
Yeah, they're in their 50s now.
So, and I think that's also kind of a testament to, like, I love the fact that, they've been together in manga verse, in the time that they've been together in the manga has been 15-ish so years. So, they're an established couple. They've been living together for a long time. But they also didn't find each other until not later in life, because, like, late 30s isn't, you're not old, but, like, they're not, childhood sweethearts, or they didn't meet in their 20s or at university or something. They kind of fell into a relationship, and one of them needed a place to stay. They'd hooked up a couple times, and, like, he needed a place to stay because his apartment got flooded, and he was complaining about it to the other guy. He's like, oh, why don't you just come live with me then? Saves you having to, find a new apartment. I mean, we know each other. That's fine. And he's like, okay. And he just never left. So it's like they known each
True
other.
love.
They'd gone on a couple dates. But they weren't automatically, like, the perfect person for each other either. They're very different personalities. Which is also really lovely, I think. And they have totally different occupations, they have totally different, like, things that they're into, but at the same time, they're both very much, committed to this relationship, and they take a lot of happiness out of the times that they share their meals together, that they spend their time together. I mean, they might get on each other's nerves at points, especially Sherry. But
yeah,
but at the same time, it's real. It's real. It's the kind of thing that you can see in your own relationship of, like, you don't want your romantic partner to be like a carbon copy of you. I'm sure there might be some very happy couples out there who are that, but, like, not most of the time you're not going to agree with your spouse or your partner on everything. And you shouldn't have to. You shouldn't have to be identical people to get along and to be able to be in a long-term relationship. What did you eat yesterday? I've always kind of touted as being the quintessential celebration of food as a celebration of life, I guess, of having that time of experiencing something with another person in a very intimate way that is kind of sadly not... I always see as, like, meals as a time where you catch up with people, as a time where you interact and are able to have that. There's the act of cooking itself, and then there's the act of eating, and they're both very important, and they're both really good indicators of how people interact. And that's something that's very much highlighted in What Did You Eat Yesterday?
Yeah. What Did You Eat Yesterday is my favorite Yoshinaga work. And I think that's interesting because I hate cooking a lot.
Uh-huh.
I'm bad at it, so I hate when, like, other people are watching me cook also. So I'll do whatever I can to just cook by myself. And also, like, my family's not really... They're not really the sit down and eat with the family type of people. So I feel like that was something that I didn't necessarily have, except on, like, Thanksgiving and Christmas,
Yeah.
Is something I didn't really have growing up. So I almost, like, appreciated all the more seeing it portrayed in that series. It's like living vicariously through it, I guess.
But it's also done, like, as a cooking manga, and I know you've made this point before in relation to talking about the series, but it's a cooking manga that is, like, for normal people. It doesn't use, like, crazy ingredients. Shiro, the cook of the couple, is very frugal. Like, he's very anal about spending money. So he like always wants to buy what's cheap at the store, like, in season. And if he has some leftovers, he'll make that into something new.
Gets random vegetables from his friends, and he's like, okay, how do I work this and do a meal? So it's like, I don't know. I don't know if I can really say how much that's a thing outside of Japan, but it's very much a thing here that just, like, people just give you random vegetables. So you just end up as, like, here's some pickles, take them. And you're like, okay.
Okay, thank you.
And then you've got to figure out how to use them before they go bad. So I find Shiro's little tips about that to be quite useful.
Yeah. Plus, like, he literally befriended a woman, a middle-aged woman, so that they could split the cost of a watermelon, because they knew that they both wanted watermelon, but they only had their partners and them. They're like, we don't need a whole watermelon. It'd just be a waste of money. So they split the cost of a watermelon, and that's how they became best friends. It's like...
Yeah, I love their friendship, too. It's so wholesome.
Yes, it is.
I love, like, you know, him, like, waiting at the supermarket for the half-price stickers
Sales.
to come out.
Yeah.
At the end of the day. Or I still remember, like, the first episode of the drama, whenever I saw that. It ends with, like, the two of them, Kenji and Shiro, having, like, a fight because Kenji was, like, saw some Haagen-Dazs little ice creams at the convenience store and was like, oh my gosh, we're totally gonna eat these together, and he got, like, 2 ice creams. And Shiro was like, why the fuck would you buy $3 little cans of ice cream? And he's like, I just wanted to eat them together with you. That's me. Yeah. I'm the Kenji in the relationship.
So, yeah, we haven't even really described what the series is about. I mean, it's about cooking. It's a recipe-focused series. But it's about 2 gay men who live in Tokyo. Shiro is the one who is the cook. He does majority of the cooking. And he is also a lawyer. Is very much... like, he's the narcissist of this relationship. He's very, like, hyper aware of how he looks, his health. He's, like, hyper fixated on staying healthy, so all of his recipes have to be, like, well balanced. He doesn't want to get fat or, like, any of this. He's very vain in that sense, but he's also hyper aware of the fact that because he's a gay man, he won't have children, so he doesn't have anyone to look after him in his old age, so he has to be in his best condition, so he can live a long, happy life without having to rely on children and grandchildren who will never exist because he is a gay man.
I feel like he has a good friend network that has, like, kids and grandkids who will take care of him, though, to be honest.
He does, but he also, like, doesn't think about that because he's also really antisocial. Like, he doesn't want friends. He especially doesn't want, like, gay friends.
He has them.
He has them. He's also, like, he's very critical of, like, the gay community. He doesn't like other gay people. He doesn't, because for a long time he was very worried that he'd be outed at work. He's not out at work, or initially he's not out at work. And comparatively, his partner, Kenji, is a very, very out there, very, like, exuberant gay man, hairdresser, just talks in feminine speech, has a lot of gay friends, is very much out and proud, and has always been that way. And so they're a little bit of an odd couple, but they complement each other in ways. Kenji allows, or kind of pushes Shiro into being less anal retentive about things, where Shiro helps Kenji kind of keep his feet on the ground every so often and kind of settle down. So they're well matched.
All of their savings on Haagen-Dazs ice cream.
Exactly, because we don't have children. We need something to retire on, Kenji. The ice cream will die. Won't be able to pay rent if you keep spending all our money on ice cream. And you're like, oh my god, like, just, oh my god.
They're cute.
They are. They're really cute. And this isn't something that I mentioned before, but Yoshinaga does have doujin that she put out related to this couple, as well as related to Antique Bakery. So there's nothing, like, explicit in this manga. As Ray said, it's like a mainstream seinen series. Very wide readership. If you are wanting more intimate moments between these two, Yoshinaga has you covered. Not available in English, but they exist. So, like, they're
this
just...
is why josei mangaka are the best.
Yeah,
they
so
provide,
powerful.
you know?
They're powerful, and they know what their readership wants, and so they provide.
I love it.
Yeah, it's wonderful. The main series is all cooking. It's all cooking and sometimes like family and or friend and or work drama that has happened to most of us. I mean, I don't think all of us have had like a mother join a cult or like weird support groups and stuff.
Honestly, though, the cult thing is fairly widespread in Japan.
Yeah, no, exactly.
There are
it's
so many cults in Japan.
Yeah. Asia, all of Asia, to be honest. But, like, it's, yeah, so Shiro doesn't have a very good relationship with his parents, mother especially. She's kind of gone off the deep end a couple times. And she tries to be supportive in her own way, but she doesn't really understand what gayness is, in terms of, like, she joins a, like, support group for parents with children with, like, gender dysphoria, and he's like, no, Mom, no, I don't have that. No.
Stop,
Mom,
please.
no. She's like, oh, I'm meeting all these things, I'm learning all this new stuff, like, I understand you. And he's like, no, you don't understand, this is not, Mom, no, this is, it's kind of like, I don't know, it's sort of in the same vein as, like, she a little confused, but she got the right energy, like,
but, like, that confusion, even if she's got the right energy, that confusion still hurts.
Oh, absolutely. So he has a really, like, strange relationship with his parents, and it's something that is like quite prevalent throughout the series, and over the course of the series, comparatively to Kenji, who's always had a pretty close relationship with his mother. I think he comes from a single parent household. He has like 3 or 4 sisters. He's just one of the girls. He's always been like pretty open about himself, and they've always been really accepting. So for him to kind of see how much that the family stuff hurts his partner is something that he's kind of learning as he goes, because he never had the rejection, or like, he's always had family who understands him, whereas Shiro hasn't, which again feeds into that kind of self-hatred that he has. So it's just, yeah, it's done really good. It's done really good, and I love it. And also there's lots of delicious recipes. So the other long-running series of Yoshinaga's, which we've mentioned already, is Ooku, The Inner Chambers, which is very different. Very different from what did you eat yesterday. This is a historical speculative fiction wherein hundreds of years ago, Japan suffered a pox that caused the untimely death of men 20 and younger, I think, or just men. It just affected men, right? And predominantly young men, and is kind of endemic across Japan for decades upon centuries. And so, because of this, women have had to take up the roles of men, because they literally don't have boys anymore. They're like, you're lucky if your son lives to be like 15 years old. So obviously women have had to take up the roles that traditionally have been held by men. Leadership roles, merchant roles, head of households, etc., etc. So because of this, and this disease only affects Japan as well. Like, it's only within Japan, and this is in a period, the isolationist period. I think it happened just, like, Japan closes itself off pretty much immediately after this, in a bid to hide the fact that they don't have any men anymore, to protect themselves. So yeah. So the series initially follows the inner chambers, aka the harem of the emperor, which, you know, in real life was a whole bunch of young ladies who were sent to become the concubines of the emperor and birth his children, if that so be the case. But because, of course, women are the leaders now, and men are such a prized commodity, maybe, and there's so few of them, and are in such high demand to sire children, that they are very, very highly valued and cloistered away by families, that this inner chamber is now full of young, virile men to satisfy the emperor, who is a young woman, and hopefully, you know, just live their lives safe and presumably healthy, and perhaps become the father of the next emperor. And it follows many characters over hundreds of years. It follows actual Japanese history, but with the genders of certain important figures switched. And yeah, it is pretty dang great. I love this series a whole bunch.
I haven't read much of it.
What was I know you haven't read a lot of it, but what was your impression of what you did read?
Well, first impression, and I know we have a question about this, is that I personally really don't like the translation choices. Not necessarily the idea to go with an older form of English to reflect the older form of Japanese being used, but more so because it is not
consistent.
It's not consistent, it's not accurate, it's not adequately researched. It's like, you know, if you're gonna go with such a bold translation choice, you really do need to have the stuff to back it up. Yeah. I found it greatly distracting every time that there was some kind of inconsistency, as well as just, like, my ADD ass brain just, like, finding it very difficult to get into the volumes to begin with. So, but it's also frustrating because that type of Japanese is going to be a very difficult level for me to read in Japanese, too. So it's like, I'm kind of upset that my only options are a translation that I don't like, or just nothing, even though I read Japanese. So I guess that does color my experience with the series. But mostly it's just my library only had the first 3 volumes, so that's what I've read. Those volumes are expensive, and it is difficult to convince myself to buy, you know. Yeah. I'm sorry. I know, like, yeah, I know it's a really good series. I know everyone loves it a lot.
I don't disagree with you that, and I was going to wait until the actual question about it, but it is a series that has made a decision, or the English translation has made a decision, and unfortunately I don't think the translator has the adequate skills necessary to pull off that decision. They
or
try
the time.
They try to fake an old-timey, like, you know, eloquent
Not
speech.
even old-timey, like Shakespearean. They're going for Shakespeare here.
Yeah.
like,
but
that era of English.
They're trying to imitate eloquent speech of an upper class, of a royalty kind of group. And it just doesn't, because it's something outside of usual translation wheelhouse. I would agree that it is very inconsistent. It's something that is very distracting for a lot of people, including myself. But it is also something that when you're reading, after a point, you kind of just phase it out. Like, you get used to it, which is not glowing recommendation. No, I know.
See, that's my thing. Like, I never could. Mm-hmm. I couldn't get into the series as much as I wanted to. Mm-hmm. So it's like, I would feel like I was finally getting into the zone, which, again, is difficult for me because I do have ADD, and that is how it manifests a lot of times, is that I am a slow reader, and it is difficult to keep me from getting distracted while I'm reading. And every time one of those, like, glaring inconsistencies would come up, it would just yank me right back out of that zone that I'd worked so hard to get into in the first place. And it was really hard for me.
Yeah. Like, and I mean, and that's not a testament to you, like, you know, not every series is suited to every person. And sometimes you gotta cut your losses. It's not a, you know, it's not a judgment on you. It's not inherently a judgment on the series. It's just, it is something that is important to mention when you talk about it, as, like, the English translation goes, in Viz's handling of the series.
But all of that said, I do remember crying at the end of Volume 2.
Yeah.
With the, what, is he, like, a monk? Yeah, he's a monk, because he was bald. Yeah. That made me very emotional, and I still remember it, even though it's hard for me to remember those volumes, because, again, it's just... I hate to say it, man, but that translation really messed me up.
Yeah, and that's not a unfair criticism. And I've never said it's an unfair criticism either. Like, it is something that people bring up a lot, and it's hard because Ooku, the story itself, is very intriguing. It's incredibly well done. I'm, again, a big historical fiction nerd, so I'm predisposed to like it. But it is also...
I also know that, like, in terms of my own personal obsessions, Moto Hagio is also a fan. So...
Yeah.
Like... Oh well.
Oh well. But it's also just really interesting to see how Yoshinaga plays with gender roles in that series, and how the characters, again, very varied cast of men and women, and the implication of the idea that Japan, like, this happened, right? This happened, and Japan got over it at some point, and it's just like this hidden history that now, like, the status quo kind of went back to normal after the fact because of this shameful idea that women were running the country for 300 years. It's really interesting. A majority of the story is told kind of circumspect. It's kind of framed as the current emperor reading the history of her family and of previous emperors that she wasn't privy to, and finding the real solution, or finding the real answer to where the country is and to why society is like how it is at this point. It's really, really well done. There's as it's generational as well. As I said, it follows many, many characters over decades. And the shift of power. Like, it's kind of, I mean, I hate to make the comparison, but, like, a lot of people would liken it to any sort of politically political thriller, i.e. a Game of Thrones, but a lot more, like, actual politics and a lot less stupid fantasy fights, compared to Game of Thrones. And so it is actual history. Like, a lot of what is in these books are real history, insofar as, like, yes, this person actually existed, this was actually the emperor, that was his name, these were the things that, or laws or whatever that he put into effect, and this is how he died. But in reality, it was a girl or a woman who had taken on a male name because of tradition and because, again, Japan was hiding the fact that women were in the predominant positions of power. And so you'll get attached to a character and you'll follow a situation for a couple volumes, and then you'll be following other characters, whether it be a different time period or whether it be the people a couple generations afterwards who are kind of reacting or suffering from the choices made from those earlier characters. Volume 10 made me cry like a little bitch. Like, a lot. My two favorite characters were that storyline, and man, when I talk about the way Yoshinaga writes friendship, those two, like, immediately jump to mind for me. And I just really like how she writes male-female platonic friendship. It's just so good. And also, I'm pretty sure that one of those characters is arguably a trans man. So, like, that's also really interesting. She's not afraid to get into that stuff when you do have a society that is, like, already so outside the norm of gender roles. It's cool and definitely worth the read if you can get past the translation, and the fact that it's all finished and almost finished in English should encourage you to try it, at least. Please.
They should throw that one in a box set.
I mean, I wouldn't not buy it again, if that's what you're implying.
Like, they're not gonna. There's no reason for them to do it, but, like, I'm just thinking with those spines, it would look really sexy as a box set.
It would. Plus Yoshinaga's art on a box set. Mwah! Love it.
That would be great as well, yes.
Give it to me. But
they should include the what did you eat yesterday doujinshi in the box set.
I mean, I wouldn't complain if they did. But they don't even...
Nobody would.
No.
Anyone who reads Ooku would not complain.
That even though What Did You Eat Yesterday is a completely different publisher, they might complain.
Yeah.
But...
Look, G, it's important to have dreams in this world.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong.
You know what? They should put some of her Rosa Versailles doujins in there.
And
I'm sure that would be really easy to get the rights to.
Yeah, and Antique Bakery as well. All 14 of those doujin. It's fine. We need them.
Yep. Absolutely.
So, yeah, Ooku, very long, If you don't like talking heads as well, it might not be super interesting to you, but it is incredibly fascinating. And as always, full of really witty characters. I mean, the translation doesn't give them much help, but her characters are still very funny, very, like, snide, very, like, they interact like real human people, no matter the setting, no matter the time period, and it's just really wonderful to experience that when we are talking about fiction, because so often fiction is, you know, a certain version of a person. It's a certain aspects of a character that very often aren't even remotely related to, like, how humans actually act and behave. But like, and it goes back to Ooku and how she writes, like, people acting like people. The fact that these women are in positions of leadership doesn't automatically, like, make Japan super wonderful and, like, amazing and women have fixed all the world's problems. No! They're all in power struggles. They're all trying to murder each other. Same as in real life. Like, people get jealous. They want their children to be, you know, the next emperor. They want their son to marry this person. They want to be in control of the trading routes. They want to do, you know, people are self-interested. And so they, especially in positions of power, so once they get that power, they go crazy trying to get more power. And it's
almost like women are neither better nor worse than men and are just people who lead countries the same way that men do.
Right. We can't imply that women are people 2 podcast episodes in a row. What are you doing?
Oh my god. Gee. Let's go for 3.
Aiming high. No, exactly. And that's the thing, is that it's not like this absurdly unrealistic utopia where the world and society's problems have been fixed because men are out of the world, have been removed from society, right? That's not the future feminists want. It's like it's the future that men think that feminists want, and it's not. So it is really, again, in that sense, a very strong feminist piece, and a lot of her works are, which is, again, kind of odd considering how often she's writing about men. But yeah, it's wonderful, and it is one that I highly recommend, just insofar as it's unique. It's unique to a lot of the historical fiction we get. It's unique to a lot of these, like, societies run by women fiction that we get. And Yoshinaga is just amazing at what she does. So, yeah.
Speaking of very strong feminist pieces, I do want to talk a bit about All My Darling Daughters, which is a one-shot and was, I believe, nominated for an Eisner.
Yes.
It's a one-shot volume. It's a collection of short stories that all sort of overlap with each other in that various characters will appear in multiple stories, and they're all connected through, like, who they know and stuff. It's also bookended by this sort of mother-daughter relationship that is present throughout the whole thing, but that just serves as sort of a thematic frame for the work as a whole, I guess. But it's just about a bunch of women and, like, their lives and their interactions with the other women in their lives. There's a lot of mother-daughter relationships, but there's also, like, friends. There's romantic relationships as well, with some male characters that show up.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really good.
It is.
I really love this volume. I've definitely seen some people who, like, read it and were like, well, that was a thing. But rereading it for this podcast for the first time since I read it, like, freshman year of not high school, college or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, it's still 5 stars for me.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. I feel like even though each story is, like, so short and concise, it's like I really know every single one of the heroines. And they're all so different from each other as well. Like,
Mm-hmm.
the way that she can craft these characters that, like, are people that you know. Like, I know every single one of these women.
Mm-hmm.
But, like, they're all so different from each other. I don't even know how to, like, explain, like, but she is able to craft these characters who just, the way that they see the world and the things that they want out of life are so fundamentally different that, you know, I think that is really a strength to have as a writer, because it requires you to be able to empathize on such a profound level with people who are wholly different from yourself, which is, you know, not easy to do. I also, like, there was one thing that, the mother who's in the framing story is, has just gotten remarried to a man who is, I think, 3 years younger than her daughter.
Yes.
Right, which her daughter feels very weird about.
Understandably. Fresh-faced 27-year-old boy marrying her presumably 50-odd-year-old mother is...
Who was also a host.
Yeah. And has dreams of being an actor, or is an actor. She's like, oh god, yeah. Mom, you're being scammed.
Oh my god, you're being scammed. But no, he's like head over heels for her.
He loves her so much. And you're like, oh,
it's adorable.
Good boy. We love you.
They're so good for each other. And she's like enjoying having this sprightly young thing telling her she's beautiful all the time.
Well, she's been it's just been her and her daughter for so many years. Her husband died fairly, you know, a long time ago, at least, you know, 15-ish years ago. So you know, she's been a woman's got needs. She can't just be she's still
I respect it.
Yeah. Then the whole thing is like, the mother she survived cancer, but by doing so, it's given her this you know, this new frame of mind of like, well, I almost died, life's too short to not do what I want, so yeah, by the way, daughter, I've gotten remarried, he's coming in to move in, I want you to meet him, and you live here, so you're gonna have to put up with him. Right? And thus the story begins.
Yep. And thus the daughter is like, well, I have a boyfriend too, and I'm moving out. And her mom's like, okay.
Don't let the door hit you on the way out.
Jesus, you've been here long enough. And then they hug it out, and it's very sweet.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, but, like, there's this part where he's like, I don't know, bearing his soul or whatever, to the daughter, who is 3 years older than him. And he's like, it's too bad. I have the pages open. It's too bad she doesn't like her own mother, but it's not that big a deal. I'm always on Mari's side. It's not like she's committing a crime. No one should tell her to fix her problem. In high school, I had a huge crush on my aunt. Ever since then, I'm just not attracted to anyone who isn't much older than me. And he's just talking about that, and he says, I may be a little strange, but I don't intend to fix myself. I never told anyone how I felt about my aunt. I kept it inside. I didn't want to make things awkward. So when I fell for Mari, I decided not to hold it back. I mean, I wasn't doing anything wrong. And I just, like, I was reading that and I thought, like, it's kind of like a perfect summation of what I like about how Yoshinaga approaches characters. Mm-hmm. Like, it's... A lot of her characters are, like, in that stage of life, I feel like, where they've realized their own flaws and the parts of them that are a little messed up and a little outside the norm. And at this point in their life, they just aren't going to fix it. Yeah. So they just find ways to live with it. And the people around them have to find ways to live with it too. And
there's an element of that that's like, and that's fine. Like, you don't have to fix everything about yourself if you're not hurting someone.
Yep. And that's what I like about it. It's, I feel like I'm starting to come into stages in my own life where, you know, I can start to, you know, not be so fucking self-conscious about everything all the time like you are as a teenager, right?
Yeah.
And just be like, you know, this thing about myself is probably not going to change. And I think that's okay. You know?
If you're not hurting anyone, if you're, you know, happy in yourself, and you got people who understand that you're a weirdo, you don't need the world to, like, approve your life for you.
But I feel like, you know, people always talk about, oh, like, this character's so flawed and, like, dark. Or, like... But Yoshinaga's characters are flawed in a more mundane way, I feel like.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Even when they are, like, they'll have flaws that are, like, you know, they get too caught up in their work and their room gets to be really messy, or, like, you know, they're, like, Shiro is way too anal about
his health and money.
His health and money. Kenji buys too much ice cream. You know, he could be a little more careful about his spending, right? So there's, like, normal flaws like that, but then even when you get, like, the messier stuff, it's still, like, portrayed as, like, in such a mundane way. Like, this is just kind of how people are, and it's just life.
Yeah.
It's not like, oh my god, the drama.
Oh my god.
It's like, people are a mess. And that's it.
Yep. And speaking of messes, read Oh My Darling Daughters. But speaking of messes, I think we got to go into Antique Bakery, because that cast is a hot mess, and I love them, but oh my goodness, okay. Just, not even just the characters, because the characters themselves are hot messes, but the premise of what this relatively, like, initially seeming mundane premise of like, oh, hot guys open a bakery and women go to this bakery because delicious cakes and hot guys. Sounds a little bit like Restaurante parody, so no. It's not. So what Antique Bakery is about a middle-aged man. He's like 35 or something. Bachelor. Comes from a really well-to-do family. Has had a pretty successful career, but hits 35 and is like, Mom, Dad, I'm going to open a bakery. And they're like, yes, of course, sure. We support you 100%. He's like, I'm going to do this. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to leave the business, and this is important for me to do. And but the thing is, he doesn't like cakes. He doesn't know anything about cakes. He all he knows is that he wants to open this bakery, right? And you're like, but why would he do that? And I will get to that. Don't worry, I will get to why he's opening this bakery cafe. But so he's like, well, I need someone to actually make these cakes. So he, puts out advertisements to hire pâtissier, and
he ends up with the guy he called a slur in high school.
Yay! So yes, his first and really only applicant to the job is a former classmate who is an incredibly gay man who in high school confessed his feelings to our main character, and our main character in disgust was like, ew, screw off, slur. And obviously heartbroken, this boy was like, oh no, and then found himself in the gay district and metamorphized into the most devilish gay man ever, who will turn any man gay, and cause so much problems at his work. Like, he's had men like try to stab each other in jealousy because they've left their wives and they just want to be with him. And he's like, I just all of my former bosses, I can't. No one will hire me. I can't keep working. He's like, please, I know you and I don't get along super well, but like, if I can work in the kitchen, if I never have to come out, and I know you're not going to fall out in love with me because you've rejected me already, it'll be great. I've worked in France, or I've trained in France. I make wonderful cakes. And so he's like, sure, you're hired. Then,
and he wears glasses just as a shield.
As a shield from his intoxicating, like, gay pheromones.
Gay eyes.
I don't know. Man, he's just, full on. And then, so, and our protagonist, he's incredibly single. Like, he's been single for a long time. He's sort of the forever bachelor. He's so desperate to, like, get a cute waitress or, like, a mature lady, cool, beautiful, big-boobed lady to work in the store. No, he has no success. But one day...
He does get a child.
A teenage boy who is like, oh my god, hi, I love your cakes. I want to become like the apprentice. I want to learn how to make cakes. I come here and this is the best cake I've ever had. Please let me be your apprentice. And our gay patissier is like, oh, please don't fall in love with me. And he's like, no, I don't, like, not that way. I mean, you're lovely, but also cake. Like, I just really want cake.
Also, like, he has this incredible sense of taste.
Yes.
Because, like, the owner of the shop is, like, hates sweets, so he can't tell when a cake tastes good or not because they all taste terrible to him. So this kid has this incredible sense of taste where, like, you know, he is useful to the chef because of that.
Yes.
And that's why he gets hired as the apprentice.
Yes.
And also he definitely is in love with the chef.
Oh yeah, he is. Like, there's no two ways about this. But this kid, we find out was a, like, semi-professional boxer, and had kind of been, he was kind of a latchkey kid or an orphan or something, and was basically raised by his coach. But after suffering detached retina, he was he was told, like, you're not allowed to box anymore, you're not allowed to fight anymore, and he was quite successful, and every time he won, he'd go and reward himself with cake. And so now that he's lost his outlet, his passion, he's unable to box anymore, to fight anymore, he's going into his other passion, and thus he finds himself at the antique bakery. And finally, to round out our cast is our main character's, like, personal assistant, butler, handler, who is an he's so sweet, and he's very, like, kind of, I don't know if unapproachable is the right word. He's big, he's handsome, he wears all black and sunglasses all of the time. Inside, at night, he's also the biggest dumbass you'll ever meet. Yes. He is the original himbo. Well, not the original, but he is, like, quintessential himbo energy. And he's kind of been, he's the assistant to our main character, or a personal attendant, maybe. He's always been put in charge of looking after him. But now that he's left the company, he's kind of like, well, I need to be here to support you, 'cause he's too dumb to do anything else. Like, he just doesn't,
to put it frankly,
he doesn't have any common sense. He doesn't have, and he has, oh my god, he has a daughter with this woman who, she's like, I just wanted to have a child. Like, I only had sex with him because I wanted a beautiful child, because, again, he's, like, handsome as all get out. But she's like, but she's so dumb. She's just like her father, because she's, like, a professor or something. She's like, I wanted her to have brains and beauty, but, girl, she missed out on, she's not, the daughter isn't as dumb as her father, we'll put it that way, but also, oh, they're sweet. But, so he starts working he's like, well, I need something to do, because all I've ever done for the last, like, 30 years, well, no, 20 years, is be your attendant. What am I supposed to do now? So he's like, okay, you can be our waiter. You can eat, like, the all black thing works. Sunglasses, fine, mysterious. And just write down the orders and give them to me, and it'll be fine. And it takes him 3 times longer to write down the order than anyone else, but it's working. But when he meets our gay patissier, the pheromones hit, and he is just gone. He's gone for this baker. He is absolutely just completely dedicated. And oh no, this baker feels really bad, because he's kind of like, he knows that he can get any man that he wants. And so he's not exactly the most... He
has, to be honest.
He has, exactly. And so he's not, like, super faithful. He's not like, really a quote-unquote good partner, but at the same time, he recognizes that, and he's told that, like, this other guy doesn't care. No matter how badly he treats him, he'll still, want to be with him. And it's sad, but also really sweet. And but messy. And then, meanwhile, Ono still, like, kind of has feelings for our main character, so there's, like, all of that going on. I mentioned there's doujin for this series before. That is legitimately, like, what a majority of the doujins are about, is about his, like, lingering feelings for this boy who was the only person who's never loved him. Meanwhile, he's, like, trying to maintain a relationship with this guy, like, with his actual boyfriend / the best friend / closest person to the guy he liked. Oh my god, drama. Meanwhile, our child is just like, oh my god, adults are weird. And also, he has a great girlfriend. It's like his French teacher or something. She's amazing. Anyway. But, okay, so that's our cast. 4 attractive men of varying ages, but majority middle-aged men, and 1 teen who invited himself. And I hear you say, but gee, you said that the protagonist doesn't understand cakes, doesn't like cakes, hates the taste of cake. Why does he want to open a cafe? I shall tell you, indeed, dear listener. I mentioned previously that he came from a very affluent family. So, when he was 12 years old, he was kidnapped. He was kidnapped by some man, some mysterious person, kidnapped him and detained him for weeks. And the only thing he fed him was cake. Thus, obviously, he has a traumatic response to the taste and idea and thought of cake. So he was, like, just detained for 3 weeks, fed only cake. And I don't know, it's not implied that this kidnapper did anything, like, molested him or anything. He didn't, I don't know if he asked for ransom money. We don't really know the specifics of the situation because this kid was 12 and was traumatized. All we know is that after 2 weeks, he was let go, rescued by police. No one was ever arrested for it. And so his kidnapper has been out and about, living his life normally for the past 20-odd years. And so, dear listener, the plan is, the only thing that he knows about his kidnapper is that he loves cake. And thus, he shall open a cake store to lure in his kidnapper for, we don't really know why. Like, he doesn't have an end game to this. Like, what is he gonna do? What proof does he have that this is the man who kidnapped him 20 plus years ago? And also, like, how, it's been 20 years, how will he even remember what this guy looks like? It's the most convoluted, flawed plan ever concocted, but damn it, it's his plan, and he's going through with it. And thus the Antique Bakery is born. So, a little bit of a different premise compared to Ristorante Paradiso, but it is incredibly good. It's very funny, drama abounds, and it'll make you cry. All of Yoshinaga's series make me cry. So, I mean, what else is new? But it's really good. And it's just interesting to see, again, these characters, they have so many problems. They have so many flaws that they recognize in themselves. And they kind of understand that there's ways that they could change that about themselves, or that most people would fix that, but at the same time, they're just like, well, I've survived till this point. Why change now?
Ain't that the truth?
Pretty much. So, yeah. Antique Bakery. And that one is, I don't know, I think that volume 3 might be a little bit harder to find, but it's definitely worth the watch, if not the read. It's a pretty close adaptation. Not 100% one-to-one, but it covers all the major bases. And it's super good. Super good. And, man, yeah, our protagonist is like such a lech. There's a reason he doesn't have a girlfriend despite being like incredibly rich and successful. And
it's that he sucks.
Yeah, exactly. His personality sucks. And like opening this cafe with a man who he like insulted in their youth.
Literally called a slur.
Yeah. And a boy who just, again, invited himself, and this guy who's been assigned to him, basically just to make sure he doesn't get kidnapped again. And also to be his emotional support animal whenever he has a nightmare.
Emotional support himbo. What a concept.
Yes, exactly. I mean, sign me up for that one. I'd invest.
Right?
But
how much you want?
One himbo, please. I need him. But so it's as always just an absolute mess of a cast, but who are so, despite that, so interesting, so likable, so understandable, even if they're not good people, or not, they're not nice people, they're still people, and they, like, I don't know, you sympathize with them. You can say you're making every wrong decision that can be made, but I understand why you're doing it. It's just, and to be able to do that, I mean, you said it yourself with the, like, with All My Darling Daughters. Yoshinaga's incredibly good at crafting a character in a very short amount of time. And so, although Antique Bakery is 4 volumes, so much gets explored insofar as the characters in those 4 volumes. Like, it really does dedicate the time to each and every one of those 4 main characters. Ooku, I mean, it's a longer series, but each character is in there for a much briefer period than the length would suggest. Her BL, even stuff like Garden Dreams, which we haven't even mentioned, but is a single volume book. And that, in 3-4 chapters, is able to craft several characters, very, very strongly. And even What Did You Eat Yesterday? I mean, it's 90% recipe, so that remaining 10% is where you get the character stuff, but you still understand so much about these people and who they are and why they do the things that they do. I know we need to get into questions, but I do want to talk a little bit about Flower of Life just before we finish.
Right. I forgot about Flower of Life.
Yeah, I won't allow us to forget Flower of Life. But no,
I know it's like your favorite.
It is my favorite. So Flower of Life is, as I mentioned at the beginning, the first of her manga that I got into and read and fell in love with. It follows a high school boy called Haru Hanazono, I think is his name, or Harutaro Hanazono, aka Hana, who starts school a little late. It's about a month into the school year, and he's in front of his classmates, and he's got bright blonde hair, and he's really tall, and all of the kids are kind of like snickering to themselves and like, oh, look at the new kid, like he's a weirdo, why did he dye his hair like that, what's going on with him, like he's starting late into the school year, wonder if there was drama at his old school, you know, shit that teenagers do, gossiping. This kid hasn't said one thing yet and they're all like making judgment calls. Teacher is like, oh, shut up kids, we're gonna introduce the new boy. And he's like, hey, hi there, my name is, you know, such and such, and the reason I started school so late is because I had leukemia. And the whole class is like, oh shit, like, oh god, we're terrible people. And immediately that like guilt of like, oh sorry, we didn't know, like, and he's like, no, it's fine, like, I got better, don't worry about it. So, our main character, as he explained, had leukemia. He was hospitalized for an entire year, which meant that he missed his first year of high school. And so he's starting a year late. And it's this book and the story is about his life and his classmates. He very quickly becomes best friends with another boy in his class who's pretty ostracized for being the fat kid. But he oh my god, those two are such good friends. Also, it was kind of the first time that I'd seen a fat character portrayed positively, like in manga. He's just, he's such a good boy, and he's so sweet, and he never is, like, the main character never makes a big deal about his weight, and there's actually a really powerful scene about that, in regards to, like, you getting mad about people making fun of me just, like, calls more attention to it, and I don't like being the center of attention. It was really well done, I think. But then also in order to, like, become besties with his new best friend, he's like, okay, which club are we gonna join? And he's like, well, I'm part of the manga club because I really like manga. And he's like, oh, like, I don't really read manga, but when I was in hospital, I did a lot of drawing. And so he's, like, a really good artist. But the other member of the manga club is just a total asshole. Like, he's the worst. Majima is the worst. Oh my god. He's just, like, one of those kids who's so, like, self-important, thinks he's cooler, like, too cool to interact with anyone. He's also kind of a dumbass. And he's, like, he's mean. He doesn't get along with anyone. And Hana, as, like, a pretty outgoing, likable, personable guy, he just he has a pretty strong, like, black and white morality. So his first impression of someone is kind of what he sticks to for things. And he does not like Majima, but he puts up with him because his new best friend, his bestie, wants to be in the manga club, and they're gonna make manga together, and Majima knows a lot about manga, so he's like, I guess I'll hang out with Majima as well. Ugh. Meanwhile, their homeroom teacher is a young woman, very tall, somewhat masculine looking. Hana initially thought that she was a gay man, and that's sort of been a complex of hers for a long time. So she was having an affair with one of the other teachers who is married because, you know, bad choices, but it's a you know, relationship, or it was an affection that she held for this teacher from back when she was in high school, like back when she was his student. So yeah, big yikes. And it turns into worse yikes because at some point she starts getting into a relationship with Majima, and that's all sorts of not good. But again, as we know, when we talk about this, that Yoshinaga is like, I'm interested in this, but also it's fucked up, so this is not something that is good choices. Do not make the choices that this teacher makes, because she's all sorts of messy. But in the same time, like, an understandable, sad, messy, because she doesn't have the self-confidence in herself. She doesn't have, like with the teacher, in her very first BL, she attaches herself to people who show her affection or who show her interest. A lot of her messy or like bad choices, romantic characters do that. It's quite prominent, and the way that is handled is very good. But ultimately, this is a story about this class of teens, and when I said that Yoshinaga can capture the teenage experience perfectly, despite probably being 2 decades out of high school, oh my god, I wasn't lying. There's a scene in Flower of Life where one of the girls lends a book to one of the other girls. So she borrows a book from another girl who's like quite put together, a little bit more mature than everyone else. And she reads it and she dog ears the page, right? She doesn't use a bookmark. She dog ears the page, and she gives it back, and she's like, oh my gosh, that was such a good book. Thank you so much, blah, blah, blah. And she notices that, this girl gets to the dog ear and is like, she doesn't, like, she gets upset about it. She doesn't say anything or like start yelling or crying or anything, but you can see that like, no, we don't dog ear in my house. And then, so this girl who did it,
I'm not lending a book to anyone ever again.
Well, and this girl she sees this reaction and she recognizes that her friend's upset. And so she goes home and she's just like in her bed, like, oh god, I can never talk to her again. She hates me now. I don't want to go to school tomorrow. This is, oh god, the world is going to end. And I'm sorry, but if you were a teenager and that shit didn't happen to you at some point, you didn't do the teenage experience right, because that was, that assumption that somebody hates you over like the smallest thing. Yeah. But then she goes to school the next day, and she's still really hesitant and nervous, and she doesn't know what to say, and like she wants to grovel and apologize even more so than she did the day before. And the girl who, lent the book, she's like, oh yeah, here's the next one in the series. And here's a bookmark. And it was fine. like, it was fine. So, just that assumption that like, oh god, the world is going to end, but ultimately, like, it's not even anything, right?
Yeah.
That I loved. There's a whole subplot, because our main character, as obviously he had leukemia. Because of this, his family is very like close, somewhat protective of him. His older sister, she's going through a lot. She's unemployed. She basically looks after the house while she's at school. Says she's looking for work, but she just kind of has given up. She every so often will go out and drink herself, stupid. But she just wants to, keep the house together. Their mother is off, like, she's always in another country, because their parents are chicken sexers, so they can tell which chicken is a boy chicken and which is a girl chicken, and separate the chicks once they've hatched, which is apparently a job that's very in demand. So the mother is always like in Spain or like somewhere sexing chickens. And the mother is like, she's the one that runs that household. Holy shit. They all love her, but like her word is law. She comes home and they're all like, yes, Mom, yes, thank you for gracing us with your presence. Thank you. Please, yes, we're not worthy. The whole family really likes cute things, which is why this guy loves his bestie, because he just thinks he's the most adorable person ever. Like, he just loves him so much. He's like, oh my god, look how cute he is. And he introduces his friend to the sister, and she's like, oh my god, your friend is so cute. I love him. He's the best. He's like, I know, right? And they geek out over his friend. It's just really wholesome. They have a really sweet dynamic, and their father, again, is a chicken sexer. He comes in and out from work every so often, but it's typically the two kids who are together. It's great, but you see, over the course of the series, you find out the part of the reason that this older sister is having so much stress in her life and she's kind of a mess is because, and the reason she's so adamant about looking after her younger brother is because there's still like a 50 to 60% chance that the leukemia could come back within 3 years, which they were hiding from him because he thought he was cured. He thought he was over it. He'd never have to worry about it again. When he realizes, and this is something, again, this like laughing 1 second, crying by the next page, is just done so well. And it's actually where the series itself gets its title, Flower of Life. Because when he learns about that, he kind of recognizes that, you know, he's in his flower of life. He's in the midst of his youth, the best years of his life, quote unquote. You know, he's young. He shouldn't have to be worrying about his untimely death from, you know, a horrifying and debilitating cancer. And so in comparison to this very real illness that may afflict him, a lot of the other petty drama, a lot of the other like teenage angst and like high school stuff seems really insignificant. It seems really he's quite dour and you know, defeatist about it, but at the same time he recognizes that he can't stay that way, and it's just done really well. It kind of comes to a point because Majima and the teacher's relationship doesn't work out, because it shouldn't work out, for one, but it doesn't work out, and Majima's like, I'm gonna stab her and I'm gonna stab that other teacher. I'm like, and he's just like, okay, fucking stab them then. Like, what are you gonna do? Well, is that gonna make you feel better? Are you just gonna get arrested? You're an idiot. Like, why? Well, if you're gonna stab someone, stab me. Like, I'm gonna die anyway. And you're like, oh my god, this is all my drama. And it's really good. Like, and then it's a shame that the 4th volume isn't readily available, because the 3rd volume does give it somewhat of a kind of conclusion. It's not left super like, oh man, I need to read more of it. I mean, you should want to read more of it because there is more of it, but you're not inherently unsatisfied with the end of the 3rd volume, but the 4th volume does really make it into what I would consider the masterpiece that it is. And it ends with Hana like telling his first lie, being untruthful to somebody for the first time, and it's because he was introduced as like a very truthful, like speaks his mind, very black and white, sense of morality, always, you know, has this idea of a moral compass, etc., etc. But his experience over his first year of high school changing that, and the people in his life changing that, not inherently for the better, but also not inherently for the worse. And that's, isn't that the human experience? So,
there you have it.
Yep.
It was good. I just don't really have anything to add because I haven't read it in years. So.
Yeah, and that's fair. Also, that one does have food in it as well, like, because the sister is always at home, you know, looking after the house, so she's always like making pumpkin bread and stuff, and you're like, oh, even here we see the recipes.
Of course,
gotta stay on brand.
All right, should we finish up with some questions?
Absolutely. And we got so many wonderful questions as always. Thank you guys so much.
I guess we will start with the one that we mentioned earlier, which is from @DreMoraDre. What are your thoughts on the translation choices for Ooku? I feel like I more or less made them clear.
Yeah. I mean,
did you have anything else to add?
It hasn't, like, I can still read it. I still, you know, love the series, but it was a risky choice that I can't say worked for them. But by the same token, I don't think that a straight translation would have worked for the series necessarily either. So I just feel like there was better ways to do that, and probably more experienced translators who were more experienced with adapting that sort of work or using that sort of language. And unfortunately they weren't, you know, that's not who was given the job. And, you know, it's definitely a valid criticism. I don't think it's unfair to say that it does impact your reading. But for me personally, at point, like, once I'm into it, once I've gotten over that initial of like, oh yeah, this is how this is written, it is like I kind of forget about it and just go along with it once I'm actually reading and engaged with the story.
And for me, it ruined the reading experience. So there you go. At Bacchus Vines asks, Fumi Yoshinaga loves their food. Yes, she does. What food scene or moment is your favorite?
Does one immediately come to mind for you, Ray?
Not really. They all kind of, I wouldn't say it's like a specific scene so much as just like her general writing around food and the ambiance it creates as a whole. And the thematic underpinning. There's not like a specific meal in What Did You Eat Yesterday that like I'm like, oh yeah, that scene with food was so much more standout than all the other scenes with food.
Yeah. Especially because What Did You Eat Yesterday is almost a meditation of cooking itself. Like it's a celebration of the preparation as well as the like quote unquote big reveal, and the enjoyment of indulging in that food afterwards. It's like a whole thing, right? Like it's a whole event from the beginning to the end of that meal. I mean, there's some stuff that definitely stood out insofar as like when I read it, it was powerful and poignant, and like because it was reflective of nostalgia, or it had like a memory attached to it, or it bridged a relationship for characters, but there's nothing like immediately coming to mind.
All right, and the next question is from @_sparkling_roses. What work of Yoshinaga's do you like best, and why? I like What Did You Eat Yesterday the best. I just like the, obviously I like the representation in it, but I also just like how chill it is. I don't know. It's a very relaxing thing to read, and I just enjoy being with the characters, and I enjoy, reading the recipes and looking at the food when it's done. I guess I like it for the same reason that I like watching shows on the Food Network.
Yeah. I mean, Flower of Life is not only my favorite Yoshinaga manga, it's probably my favorite manga, full stop, of all time. I adore it. It's not perfect, but it does everything that it needs to perfectly, and it hits me in perfect ways. It's just so good at what it does. And considering that I have read most, if not all, of Yoshinaga's stuff, like it's somewhat arbitrary to like choose a favorite, but Flower of Life was my first. It's still very powerful. I reread it, not as often as I think a lot of people reread their favorite stuff, but every time that I do revisit it, it's just as good as I remember, if not better, in ways that I didn't even realize, and ways that I've come to appreciate more as I've gotten older. And it's just, yeah, it's beautiful, and it's a shame that the entirety of it isn't readily available. But don't let that dissuade you. Do pick up the first 3 volumes. Good characters, good story.
Yeah. First 3 volumes are good. I can attest. Having not read the 4th one. And then the last set of questions is from @Crucive. First, we have one that says, favorite recipes from What Did You Eat Yesterday that you would like to try?
There's a couple cakes I'd be interested. Honestly, like there's a lot of the side dishes I'm interested in trying as well. There's just, and pancakes. There's like a fluffy pancake one.
Yeah. Souffle pancakes are really good. But I like seeing a lot of them. They're way above my cooking level because, as established, I hate cooking. So I think the baking things are more realistically interesting to me. But just reading the most recent volume for the podcast, there was a recipe for mapo tofu, which looked really good. I love whenever they do like Chinese style cooking, because those recipes always look so good to me. I love like Japanese Chinese cuisine.
Like, Japan's idea, you know how there's Chinese.
Yeah, there's American Chinese food, there's also like Japanese Chinese food, and I do like Japan's take on Chinese food.
Yeah. Neither of them are really Chinese food, but
no. But it's good.
It is good.
It's good. Then we have moments in Yoshinaga's non-foodie works where the presence of food stood out to you. You mentioned the sisters cooking in Flower of Life.
There's a scene where a bunch of Hana's classmates go to his house or his apartment to study.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The older sister's like super keen because he hasn't really had friends over, especially, not for a while. So she's, pulling out the stops, and she makes this cake bread thing for them. And everyone's like, oh my gosh, it's so delicious. It's so yummy. And that was just really lovely. And then one of his classmates, like, totally has the hots for the sister. And there's all other stuff comes out of that. But it was really sweet. And again, kind of plays into this idea that for her character, she's performing a role for him and for herself to kind of provide and make sure he's happy and make sure that he's always, not worried about things. And it's reflected later in how stressful that was for her. It's just, everything has a purpose. Everything has a purpose.
There's also, I thought it was cute how much of it's not so much the food specifically, but like, eating dinner with family.
Yeah.
In All My Darling Daughters, the daughter and her husband are just like, even after she's like left the house for a few years, she's just still a constant fixture at her mother's dinner table because they just show up like, hey, hope you don't mind having us over for dinner.
Again, for the third time this week.
And she's, and her husband's just like, I don't even know why we're here. Like, she's just here, like, judging all of her mom's friends, and her mom's like, this is not your house.
You don't live here. You don't get to tell me which friends I can and can't have.
But I thought that was cute, that it's like, always, they're always at the dinner table just talking about other people, so. It kind of reflects how Yoshinaga tends to treat, like, food scenes in general, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Which family generation or plotline in Ooku interested you the most, G?
Okay, so, this isn't really, like, it's sort of related to a family thing, but my I mentioned this before, but my favorite characters are ones that have an arc in, like, volume 8, 9, 10. I don't remember her name, but there's a doctor, half Dutch, half Japanese, young man, ostracized because of obviously mixed heritage, and she is like a traveling salesperson. Initially was trying, and also like a total ladies woman, gets all the girls. As I said, very strongly coded to possibly be a trans man. But together they start the initiative and it's apt for right now, because they're trying to develop a vaccine for this pox that afflicts men and has killed generations of men in Japan for a very long time. And that is such a good part of the story. Their friendship, their ongoing struggle, their development, their discovery of like how this sickness happens and the science behind it before Japan really knew what science, like how medical stuff actually worked. They're still going off of Chinese medicine. The out of place feeling that both of these characters have, kind of being rejected by wider society, and their friendship they find in that, and their partnership, their partnership together in trying to make the country a better place and a safer place and a healthier place and future for its populace, and the absolute trouble that they keep running into because of political backlash or because of vested interests not wanting not wanting a cure for this or not believing that there's a cure. Does it sound familiar? Does this sound like something that may be happening and has been happening the last year? It's yeah. And it's not like I didn't purposefully choose that, and I didn't even necessarily even think about that when coming up with the answer, but that's absolutely one of my favorite parts of that series, and it's really good. And again, the ending made me cry, so
there you go. And then the last question, finishing out this set from @Crucive, is what makes Yoshinaga's BL series stand out to you? We kind of talked about this earlier.
Yeah. I mean, aside from being very outside the scope of what was typical for BL at the time and outstanding, just the fact that female characters exist and are their own people and, like, have relevance to the plot. The fact that half of them I read for the actual plot and not just to see boys kiss. There's a lot, and just, I don't know. I know I've said that there's a lot of, like, messy relationships in her BL. There's a lot of, like, people you wouldn't want to be in relationships with in their BL. But at the same time, like, you do, at the end of the day, you do kind of root for all of these relationships to work out because, yeah, they're weirdos and they're assholes and they're, you know, pains in the ass, but, you know, someone's got to love them, and presumably they found that person in this book. So, hope for us all.
Right on.
But yes, so with that has been our episode on Fumi Yoshinaga. I know I've threatened it for so long, but we've done it. It's over. It's my birthday. I'm allowed to do what I want. And so hopefully this was interesting, entertaining, informative. And I hope if you haven't tried her series yet, then please do, because as mentioned constantly, there is a lot of her stuff available. A lot of it is very affordable to buy, find, get, and it's well worth it. We didn't even talk about her art, but she's very good at what she does. Next month is April. Well, and it's coming in quick. But next month is April, and our topic for that is comedy manga. We're going to be talking about all the funny comics.
Yep, we're going to be April Fools.
Yes. Although much later than actual April Fools. So
yeah, it's not going to be coming out on the 1st at all.
Don't expect it to be. I'm sorry, but it's just not. We're not that good and that organized.
No.
No. But be sure, if you have any questions or if you have any of your favorite comedy series that you want to talk about, or mention or want us to know about, let us know in the comment section down below. Let us know all your questions down below if you're watching this on YouTube. Or look out for my tweet, which I post on Twitter, obviously, once a month. And I will, just ask for questions when I do, as always. What else? Oh, yes. You can also, if you're not aware, you can listen to the podcast on pretty much every podcasting platform there is. Just make it nice and easy for you, as well as on YouTube at my channel, Simply G, where I make regular manga content like this. And Ray is on her own YouTube channel, Whimsical Pictures, which is wonderful. And if you're not subscribed to her, do that. I don't know why you're not. And as always, links to those will be in the description down below, and also in the descriptions of all the podcasts on various platforms and things like that. What else? Oh yes, and on my Twitter as well, we have a form for anyone who's wanting to be a guest for future podcasts episodes. We've had a couple of guests on the show before. If you are interested, if there's a topic you're really wanting to talk about, if there's a series or creator you're really invested in, let us know. We'd love to have you on.
Yes.
Yes. So, with that, we shall bid you adieu. Thank you guys so much for listening. You'll see me in the next video and the next podcast episode. Catch you guys later. Bye till then.
Bye. Tell G happy birthday in the comments.
Another year around the sun, getting progressively older, inching towards that mortality. Alrighty.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.